not only on myself but on the show. Mr. Griffin is definitely on the Mount Rushmore of people that have influenced me, and he's right there probably battling for the top spot with Dr. Ron Paul, so definitely an honor to have him. Last time we had Mr. Griffin on was right before his Red Pill Expo, which I drove across the country to go to. It was definitely well worth it. Awesome event, about 600 people there. Couldn't actually believe how well attended it was and how much energy Mr. Griffin had putting everything on, and he was there, all the way till about 2:30 in the morning, and then back up the next morning, and definitely a model for everyone. When it comes to just how much energy Mr. Griffin has. But last time he was on the show, we talked about QAnon, which I didn't really want to get into because I knew that it was probably not the best subject to bring up to one of your idols, because I know it's sort of like a controversial thing. But I do feel that we are pretty vindicated, seeing where we are today versus where after the selection. So we've had a lot going on since the last time we spoke, even though it was in October. We've had the events of January 6th, which so-called insurrection. We had the presidential selection. We had impeachment round number 2, which is just going on, and now we're seeing the emergence of this Patriot Act 2.0, where basically everyone who's probably watching this is going to be labeled a thought criminal. But I do think it's worth noting, we're putting a timestamp on this. Today is February 1st, 2021, and we've seen one of the biggest moves upwards ever by silver today, and also on Friday as well. And just wanted to get Mr. Griffin's take. I think we'll start in the silver markets on this wild action we've been seeing, and if you think that now is the time when the retail investors are finally starting to care about sound money, or do you think this is more of a sort of a flash in the pan, and do you think this is the beginning of more things to come, Mr. Griffin? Yeah.
Using fiat currencies, which means, as your listeners know, it means that there's nothing behind the currencies except the restraint and good judgment of our fine leaders, which brings into question how firm it really is, because they just keep making more and more money as they need to finance their various enterprises. There's no limitation as to how much money they can spend now, because all the brakes are off. They can just create it at will. And so they just spend, and every time they spend more than goes out of existence, and I should say, take a look at that side of the formula too, because people have often asked me, how come we don't see more inflation? And we know that they're creating like trillions and trillions of dollars every time they go into Congress has a session. There's another $4 or $5 trillion created. Well, how come we don't have more inflation? And I'll just keep on the sidetrack for a second. I hope to remember to come back to the main track. And the sidetrack is that it's because people around the world are still anxious to have U.S. dollars, and they transact their major business transactions in dollars, and so they gobble them up, even though they're worthless. Their own currencies are even in worse shape than ours. So we look good by comparison to some of these other countries. And of course, the other factor is that there's a lot of money going out of the bucket too. We look at the money supply like it's water going into a bucket. I mean, there's a big fire hose full of water going into this small bucket. How come it's not overflowing? Well, if you look at the bottom of the bucket, it's because there's a huge hole in the bottom of the bucket. And it's a lot of that money that's coming into existence for the first time is also going out of existence because people have bad debts and the banks have to write off credit card debts and mortgages and so forth. And all that money that was on the books as supposedly spendable money, M2, M3, and so forth, that is going out of existence too at a rather alarming rate, but you don't see the numbers on that. So anyway, in spite of all of that, now I get back to the main track, I think the average person is beginning to sense that the money supply, the U.S. dollars or even the yen or the Deutschmark, I mean, they're all going kaput. And so a crisis comes along, and all of a sudden people are paying attention to what's going on in the world, whereas previously they could say, oh, it's just it's more of the same, more of the same. Yeah, it's bad, but anyway, what time does Dancing in the Stars come on again? And so never don't take it too seriously. Now in the times of real panic and apparent crisis out there, people are thinking, well, gosh, what's going to happen if the banks close down and all my money's in the bank? I can't all stick it under my mattress. And then they're hearing about, the Great Reset when Klaus says, yeah, in another year and a half or 2 years, nobody will have any property and you will be happy.
and no privacy too, yeah.
And no privacy, but you'll be happy.
And so, yeah, that quote came out of Denmark, by the way, so no surprise there.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I guess I'm rambling a bit. I guess I'm rambling a bit, but it does cover all of these areas. And I think even the guy doesn't want to know about these things. He can't help but discover just peripherally that things are not looking good for the economy. And if he's smart, he's beginning to think, gee, these things have happened in other countries. Maybe it could happen here. And so their confidence level in the stability of the American system and the American dollar has been greatly lowered. And so I think now we finally come to the answer to the question. I think people are worried about their own survival economically. And they're thinking, well, gosh, if I've got a few $1,000s in the bank, that's good. I get me going over some rough spots. But what happens if the bank closes? Or if they don't like something I said on Twitter and they confiscate my bank account? Just close it down because I'm under investigation for being a terrorist or something, And so they're thinking about these things, and so now that means they're looking for other places to put whatever savings they have. And, well, what do you know? Silver and gold and other assets are very likely and interesting candidates, so is cryptocurrency. And so I think we're beginning to see people are making an exodus, beginning to make an exodus out of the banking system, out of fiat money, and they're looking for safe harbors, and that's the bottom of it.
Yeah, and we're seeing at the point now where banks in Florida are closing down former President Trump's accounts basically just because he's orange man bad, and they are closing him down. And so if it can happen to a former president, I mean, this can happen to anybody, and this should be
Right.
a warning shot. I mean, I voted for Kanye West, so I'm not like even as a point that the whole system is a fraud. But you had mentioned a lot of good things in there. You mentioned the Great Reset, and I also wanted to get your take on. Are you familiar with what's going on right now currently with Wall Street Bets and the Reddit forums and how they were battling against the hedge funds? Is that something that's been on your radar, sir?
Yes, I've been following that. Mm-hmm.
And right now they have turned their attention to the silver markets to try to, in an attempt to maybe squeeze JP Morgan or whoever allegedly might be shorting the silver markets. And it's very reassuring to see that now people are starting to turn their attention on, some of the main culprits of this system and not just, a place where people go and buy video games. But I think they will find out it's going to be much tougher to try to squeeze the silver market, which is in comparison to GameStop, much, much bigger than GameStop, obviously. But do you think that that's a good sign of things to come, that now you're getting, you're because I think what it's doing is it's getting these millennials, which I'm technically millennial, and video game enthusiasts. Now they're then saying, oh, hey, we're starting to realize that the problem is central banking and the problem is the money creation. So I think that now we are at this point where a lot of the things that you were preaching before John and I were even born, and now we're starting to see our generation finally starting to gleam onto this. And I'm just hoping that it's more than just a fad, more just trying to squeeze the market, and that they finally can understand. But do you have hope that our generation, my and John's generation, will finally get it, or is it going to be too late by the time that they finally?
Tim, I have total, not only hope but confidence that that's going to happen. If I didn't, I don't know, I probably wouldn't be in the fight, because I have no doubt in my mind that what you just said is happening, and it's going to continue to happen. It's an unstoppable thing. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to happen quickly. But I think if you look at it generationally, this destructive phase that we're going through right now is probably going to be, I hope at least, it's going to be a blip on the historical record. I don't think it can last too long. It's got to go one way or the other pretty soon, because people are waking up in large numbers, and I think the master planners who are doing all this, the dominant class, as Joe Plimmer likes to call them, and I like that phrase, the dominant class. They understand that they have to move quickly if they want to close this down and lock it down. They better do it quickly, because in spite of all of the censoring and the internet blocking and all of those things, people are finding alternative ways of getting the message out. And then there's that interesting human factor that if you want somebody to read something, tell them they can't read it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We all are like that. Oh, this is something that I'm not supposed to know. Where is it? So
you cannot read Creature from Jekyll Island. Everyone out there, do not read it.
You must not. No.
Yeah. Lots of thought criminals have read that book in the past.
Yeah. So I think there's that factor is at play now, and the more people are getting banned on social media and on the YouTube and all the video channels, as we are, I think it subconsciously is delivering a message to the common person that there's something wrong about this. So a lot of things are moving in our direction, and it's going to be really rough. I mean, we're heading for the waterfall, and it is going to be rough. But in an answer to your question about the longer view, what about your generation and the one after that? I'm very confident about how that's going to turn out, because we've got the momentum and we've got the foundation. And one of the hardest things that I had to overcome when I was the age of you guys, I was very impatient. I thought, I listened to the old timers say, well, Edward, you're in a big hurry, but these things don't move quickly. It took generations to get from where we used to be to where we are now, and you're not going to turn this thing around like overnight. And I kept thinking, like hell I won't. Of course I will. Of course. You guys are get out of the way. Let me at it. Well, now here I am. I've got a few more years on me, and I'm beginning to deliver that same lecture to the young guys. Hey, wait a minute, guys. These things don't happen quickly, and they don't. That's the whole point. Our opponents have been at this for well over 100 years, very well organized for 100 years. Now that's not very long in terms of the big tableau, but still 100 years is several generations, right? It's 3 or 4 generations. And it took them that long to get to where they are. We're not going to turn this around like at the next election, because the culture has been twisted and burned and tampered with. It's going to take a long time to recharge and reform that culture and move it back to a more healthy position. So that takes generations. But it will happen. That's the point, and I'll just stop talking about it, because that's really my bottom line. I have great confidence that we are definitely going to we're creating a movement that cannot be stopped. It's just a question of how long it takes.
It's great. Sorry, John.
Yeah, and also the kids, they got their stimulus checks now, and so like they're sitting at home doing nothing, and they're getting together. All of them are very good at communicating online. My sister and brother, they speak fluently English, and they're from Norway. Everybody's communicating everywhere around the world, and a lot of them knows about the conspiracy things happening as well. They're very aware, but they're not, you don't hear them very outspoken yet. They're not, coming out there, but suddenly they pop up in a group, Wall Street Bets or whatever it is, and like, you know what? They screwed up our parents. The baby boomers. They stole, my parents' money. Now it's time to get back at them. And I think they got quite empowered by the whole GameStop thing because of course, Citadel, the hedge fund, one of the hedge funds, and Melvin Capital. Citadel is actually a really funny hedge fund because who sits as a senior advisor there? It's
Osama Ben Bernanke. Yeah. And then who was getting paid $800,000 to speak there in the past couple of years? Is Janet Yellen was getting paid $800,000 a speech. Like, who's paying Janet Yellen $800,000 for insight?
I want to get into that speaking circuit. How do I do that?
Well, yeah, it's so funny, Ed, because we know, like, we hosted a whole bunch of conferences, and we looked at guys like Ron Paul. He will anywhere from 25 till 50, and I would rather pay 800,000 to him than but it's the amount. It's nothing about that.
It's a payoff.
He actually got paid. It's a payoff. Like, it's like, here you go. For it's like you pay homage to the Don, or to the leader of the mafia.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is.
It's a good way of transferring money out in the open where everybody can see it, but you can't prove that it was a payoff or a reward or anything like that. Yeah, the game is also played with authors. Some president or secretary of state is going to write a book, and they get a $500,000 advance. Of course, the book doesn't sell, but the author got the advance, and so too bad about that.
It's very good schemes. They got this down to the teeth. But I think more and more people are just looking straight through this, and especially because, like, on today, like, not a lot of the kids, are even on YouTube. They're on a whole bunch of other social media network. I found out talking to my siblings, and they don't really care about Facebook or YouTube or Twitter even. Most of them are off of there, and they're doing their own thing in alternate universes almost. So but they're aware of what's happening, and I think they're starting to really wake up now. And this time it's different. I think this kind of empowered them. Instead of sitting there and protesting the Occupy Wall Street movement, this time they actually, they did something to really damage those bastards. And it's fun.
I would like to see somebody like you with a little investigative skills to check out something I'm picking up sort of as a rumble. I heard, and I haven't confirmed this, but I heard that it was BlackRock actually that brought these funds down with their huge.
Also, they joined the bet potentially on the one side. Is that what you're thinking?
What I'm hearing is that the bet was actually a cover, and it was really BlackRock that was doing it, but they didn't want anybody to know that, so they thought, well, let them think it was the young people doing it, catching on, and so forth. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And that really makes a little sense because BlackRock, of course, has a lot more money. It's the largest investment operation in the world, I think. So if they move a lot of money, they might want to have a cover for it. So it's something to check into. I don't know. I haven't
definitely that'd be interesting. But I like from what I've seen so far, with the Robinhood usage and all this stuff, like it seems to be like that. It's the millennials that actually did this because now they're actually coming in and they're locking them down. They can't even buy shares. Like they can buy only one GameStop share now at a time. So basically, the game is like, well, you know what? It's fine for Wall Street and the hedge funds to go out and do mass amounts of margin purchases and buy millions of shares, but you little peasant, you can only buy one share. And so I actually came after Robinhood, and there was 100,000 reviews on the Robinhood app, that's on Apple, and they actually downvoted them, so they went from 4.5% on the rating down to 1%.
Well, then Google then removed them.
Google deleted them out. top of that. So these guys are very pissed. There was a guy, he flew a banner over the Robinhood headquarters on the plane, and it said "Robinhood sucks nuts." So,
Well, the thing is, I mean, Robin
you know,
Hood was
yeah.
supposed to be taken from the rich to give to the poor, but Robin Hood's real,
Oh, it's a total
their real
No,
customers are the hedge funds that they're doing the order flow from. But it also
yeah,
highlights how antiquated the entire financial system is, because it has to do with trading a stock, then waiting 2 days for the stock to settle. I mean, they have the technology now through the blockchain where that can be done immediately, instantly. And so it all has to do with different capital requirements. And so there are some legitimate reasons. I mean, I may hate like defending Robinhood here, but there are some legitimate reasons of capital things that they needed to do, and having, basically no buffer in terms of liquidity, like riding things up. But I mean, but people, if you're getting something for free, you are the product. And so if you're getting stock trades for free, they're either making some sort of commission on the bid ask,
yeah,
or
you're
there's
the product.
something on the back end
Yeah.
that they're doing. But
And they sold it to high frequency trading firms, right? So it's pretty obvious. Also, what's happening with this whole thing too is it really shows the true colors. Robinhood was never about the little peasants. It was the total opposite. It's like that Orwellian doublespeak. Like it's like, ha, look at you silly peasants. You thought you had some power. It's really funny how Wall Street always has the upper hand, but you never know, because now you're seeing riots all across Europe, everywhere. It was quiet for a while because they were banned from doing riots, but now it's popping up back again because they're on the third lockdown now in Europe. They had a lockdown in Australia. There was one person got supposed COVID, and they locked down 2 million people.
Well, speaking of
Yeah.
fighting back,
People are getting very angry.
You can't buy physical silver today. Like today, like all the different brokers I go to, they are not placing orders for physical silver right now because it's just the market action is too crazy. So that could be
No,
one
they're out of silver. They're out
Yeah.
of silver. They've sold all they had, other than what they wanted to retain for their own, their own purposes. But I watched that go down. It happened over in about a day, actually. The real action happened in just a few hours. And so I have a friend that called me last night. He said, "Yeah, I called my broker," and he said I was able to get whatever the quantity was, is a fairly good quantity. He said, "I called back 2 hours later to see to check on the order, and I found out that they were sold out." And that was in 2 hours. So it happened very quickly. But
and it'll be interesting.
Go ahead.
Interesting to see what this is, such a bigger thing, that it's really like what they see is like the whole silver short squeeze that they're talking about. There's such a massive amount of people that are betting against silver, that are pushed down the price of silver, that I think this is like, if they could pull this off, this is going to be probably the one that takes down the whole financial system for good. If they can, fight what's called the silver squeeze, short squeeze, with the massive, they believe that, if you do the numbers, it's about $1,000, that silver should be if you if you calculate it by real inflation, and of course, gold with paper, with the paper that they have, they're getting in trouble. But you're seeing the real thing. Like I look at, here in Canada as well, we're not as bad, but the premium right now is $7-8 for our bullions here in Canada, which is unheard of. Usually it's like $1 to $2. So you're seeing the massive shortage that is starting to happening, and who knows where this is gonna go over the next couple of days. It might just blow off, or it might end up being the final silver bullet to the vampires on Wall Street.
Yeah, I think we can pretty well anticipate that they'll stop trading before that happens. Remember, that's basically, I think, what they did with the Hunt brothers, wasn't it? They were attacking the big funds, and they were buying up silver like crazy, and they just stopped the market, as I recall. I mean, they intervened, said, "Hey, you can't play our game. We own this board. You can't play on our board." So they just froze the market, and there you have it. There's the people say, "Oh, we got a free enterprise system here in America." No, we don't. It's totally controlled. Anytime they want to stop a market or adjust a market or buy into the market or whatever they do, to distort the market. They do it every day.
It's funny when you
Well,
it's
what do you
funny
think?
when you take a look at all the different things that we've prognosticated throughout the years of what could finally bring down the system. And I never my out of all the things I've thought about, I never in a million years thought it was basically millennials on a Reddit forum who were buying a basically bankrupt video game retailer during a pandemic that would be in a short squeeze against the hedge funds that then created liquidity problems throughout the system. I never thought that that was going to be like a linchpin. So it is funny that, we could have all the prognostication and what's going to be the black swan, and then we come up with something like this that probably nobody in a million years could have thought of to be the linchpin for all this.
Yeah, and what you're seeing too, like with the silver, there's actually like I talked to local guys here as well. They're saying that there's massive lineups outside of our silver retailers that I know who are and so on here in the city. So it's happening probably around the world because now we got the internet and a lot of people are maybe they'll do some education when they buy that physical silver, and maybe they'll pick up Ed's book or maybe my book or something else to actually like understand. It's like, wow, what is happening here? Because people will wake up here. There's going to be a lot more people waking up from all of this stuff, being involved in the frenzy. There's going to be people waking up to reality.
But the
and
problem is, though,
the
do they
real
wake
things.
up
And I
and
think
run to
this is
another collective, though? That's the issue. I mean, they run from one collective to another collective, and,
Oh,
and
for
so
sure,
that's where I'm not as optimistic.
well, that's what Ed is here for. That's why we got
That's
Ed.
why I'm here. That exactly.
Yeah.
Because I leave it up to bigger brains than mine to worry about what the market is going to do and how you play it and so forth. All I know is that we've got to change the prevailing system. The prevailing system right now is collectivism worldwide, and as long as it's that way, I mean, we are bumping our heads against it because it's not going to change. But once people understand that fundamental ideology at the basis of all of their political and economic spheres of activity, and they realize that collectivism is the enemy, and you're just going to continue to lose whatever they have left of their assets and their liberty and their privacy, and now possibly even their humanity, because they're out to get that too. They're out to change the way we think, and to poison our bodies and to create mood changes through chemistry and electronic signals and so forth. I mean, they're out to get everything we have as an individual human being, and that's all made possible by the underlying philosophy of collectivism, which is, as you guys know, it's that you can do whatever you want to as long as you can claim that it's for the greater good. So as long as that's the basis of collectivism, the greater good of the greater number. And all of these things that we are complaining about are justified in the minds of the dominant class, and to a large extent they convince the victims into thinking that way too. It's for their own good that I give up my liberty in order to protect myself and my family from terrorism or a virus or whatever we're supposed to be afraid of. So yeah, that's my job is to do everything I can to get people to thinking a little bit deeper underneath these issues, to understand that none of this would be possible if we lived in a system based on the principle of individualism. So that's my job, and thanks for bringing that to my attention. That's what I do every morning. I wake up and I think, how can I strike another blow against collectivism? And usually I can tap it a little bit, nudge it, but we need a lot more soldiers in the field to bring it down.
My last name translates to foot soldier in Italian, so there we go. But
Okay.
but no, we are seeing this basically call by people like John Brennan. I'm not sure if you saw that recently, where John Brennan came out and said that something along the lines of, we've got all these fascists and authoritarians and libertarians, and obviously throwing people like Oath Keepers and Three Percenters and basically anybody that's pretty much watching this into this sort of new terrorist, or like the new Al Qaeda class, because we don't go along with all their BS. And I sort of see between that and the digital dollar that they're trying to foist upon us, and it really seems like that the digital dollar is going to be here within, in my estimation, probably the next 3 to 4 years. They're going to roll this out or have some sort of stimulus that then gets tied to getting a sort of like a Federal Reserve .gov coin that they try to roll out. at that point, is it going to be a little bit too late for us to do anything? Because if they all of a sudden, well, a lot of us probably aren't keeping our money in the bank, but at that point, are they going to cut us off from the banking system, cut us off from any stimulus? Not that I'm hoping on that anyways, but once we get to that point where they have the currency that's completely controlled centrally, through centrally controlled blockchain, is it sort of like game over? Because for me, that's the number one thing I'm trying to fight against, is that mark of the beast type system they're trying to roll out. And after reading your book is where I really started to notice that. But do you see that we're on like this precipice right now where it's either going to shift one way or another, and that's sort of going to be like the defining fight, at least of basically of our generation right now?
Well, I don't think it's ever too late. But that's not really what you're asking. You're just saying, will we have gone so far that in order to escape it would require such great pain and suffering that it's unthinkable, And so that's really the question. It's never too late. And I think if we learn anything from history, it's that civilizations have gone through cycles of great oppression. Maybe they didn't have all the technology that they have today, but they had total means of controlling the people at the point of a sword, and even in my lifetime, I could see that during World War II, the Nazis and the Italian fascists and the communists were already in full bloom by that time, and they were controlling their people. Yes, it's true, they already had perfected the idea of propaganda and working on the minds and the loyalties of people, but still the basic mechanism of control was primarily the sword and fear of physical pain and punishment and death. But and the people who lived under those systems, and you go back even further to ancient Rome, there were people who lived under tyranny and they knew it, but they couldn't speak out against it. The word would get out that they were enemies of the state, so to speak, or of the crown or the emperor, and they would pay for their lives. So, and it seems like if we look at history at the long view, we see that these cycles have always worked through. Somehow there's enough indignation and revulsion throughout the whole system that even those at the top begin to break away. And what we now call whistleblowers become enemies of themselves or their own class, however you want to speak of it. Like I think of Yuri Bezmenov. Everybody's heard of him now, the KGB defector that I interviewed back in the 60s. He came from a privileged family. His father was a general in the Soviet army. He was born into luxury. He had all the privileges. He didn't even have to work. And he was in the KGB, had limousines and air travel and the finest food and whatever he wanted. And yet he defected from the system at great risk to his life because he couldn't take it anymore to see such injustice inflicted by his own class, so to speak. So there are always those things that happen, and I think that what we're going to see, I hope at least, but I also honestly think, that as this thing becomes more obvious, there are going to be more and more people on the inside who will just come on and say, look, I'm not going to participate in this anymore. And first of all, they'll start leaving it. And secondly, they're going to start turning against it. And then there will be internal struggles, and it'll fall apart. And then there will be great suffering across the board. And maybe foreign nations and systems will try and pick up the pieces and conquer and slaughter and plunder. I think the Chinese would just love to see the United States prostrate on the ground before their soldiers. I think they'd love it because they've always felt for a long time that the United States was enemy number one. And so we can't ignore these things. These are real, and it can be very, very bad. But now if you look at the long view, get outside of your own skin and say, well, that's not going to, 100 years from now is not going to help me any. All right, no, it won't. But if you're thinking in the long view that it will help society, it'll help your grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren and the children of people you don't even know. If you think in terms of being a human and part of the human race and having a feeling of what is right and wrong, then you can, I found out, I can go to bed at night, and even though things are horrible, I have a smile on my face because I thought, well, today I put another brick in the foundation of a new system that's going to be full of liberty and understanding and privacy and prosperity and camaraderie, brotherhood, peace, and justice. So just to be part of that process is very rewarding. And so the short answer to your question is that yes, I do think it's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen quickly, and there's going to be one hell of a price to pay in the meantime. But that's why we're here. We're here to participate in this transition.
So ultimately, the Great Reset is, I mean, it sounds like hopefully is going to fail, and because there's only so much they can push it. I mean, you had mentioned too about making this obvious. I mean, I don't know how much more obvious they can make it now with saying last week we need 2 masks and 3 masks and 4 masks, and in China you need to get like anal swabs for your PCR test. I mean, they're making it at this point, it's so over the top ridiculous that I can't believe it's almost like the powers that not be are trying to just see how far they can push it and see, okay, can we get them to do this?
We know that's part of it. We know that they constantly push, and then when they get too much pushback, then they retreat a little bit. And everybody says, "Oh, well, we sure showed them," and they get their people together. Okay, this is how we did it wrong. Next time we're going to do it this way, and we're going to make sure this happens first. And then 6 months later, they're back at it again.
Yeah.
So, yep, that's how they work. They're very shrewd people.
Yeah, and you'd also mentioned the punishment was a sword, and so you got guys like was it Zbigniew Brzezinski, who back in the day said that it was actually it wasn't even that long ago. He said that it was far easier to control 1 million people than it was to kill 1 million people, and then I think before he passed away, he said it's far easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. So the powers that be see that things are coming down. It's just whether or not how crazy things get, and will they be willing to kill millions of people in order to try to get their agenda through? But, luckily this is waking people up to an extent that I've never seen. But sorry, John, what were you saying?
Yeah, and people like find, and see this for what it is. It's just like a cycle, as Ed said, where you have the cycle from what I call decentralization of governance to centralization of governments. Same, and money is attached to that, throughout history. You got, even in the U.S. history, you had, the central banks. Then you had, local banks that, was, issued by corporation, money that was issued by corporation, and so on. So this keeps on going. And for example, the French Revolution, you had like it was almost like tyranny, the leaders. But then you got Napoleon in, and he was even worse, a dictator. After that, but then France took it a little bit easy, but over time, these cycles, play their way out throughout history, and also empires. You were talking about that, and when they're weak, and especially when their currency is weak, that's when conquerors attack. For example, in about I think it was 1120 something. It was the Mongols came in and attacked the Chinese Sung dynasty empire that had a currency that was collapsing because they created too much credit, and it was at peak credit, and then the value started to fall apart, and society and the empire started to lose its power because of the printing. So the Mongols came in, but what did the Mongols do? Well, they came and used the same exact system. Which became then the Qin dynasty, and so that failed again. And it's just these cycles, of basically printing and centralization. But what has become more obvious, over the last, I would say probably like a couple of 100 years, ever since the United States was created, is that people are seeing more that individual part of that cycle. The more decentralization of that cycle, I think, is going to be more empowered now, and more bigger than it was before, because before there wasn't this thought of like the individual as powerhouse of the world. So I think that's going to really come back, and it's going to become a lot more powerful this time, that cycle. But we more we're moving towards more and more tyranny. But when that breaks, that's when we might see very powerful wave of decentralization coming in to the world economy. Who knows if there's ever going to be any nation states anymore? Maybe there's just local citizens living freely among everybody, and everybody had tiny little communities that they run, but everybody communicates through the global internet that we have. And nation states is full, because we couldn't trust that. anymore. But who knows where it's going to take us? It's quite the cycle that we're embarking on right now, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting to say the least.
Well, John, what you said is very interesting because at several levels. But you mentioned earlier that when one Chinese dynasty was overthrown by another, nothing really changed except the names of the emperor, because they adopted the same system. And that's really back to, we were joking, but I was not totally joking about it. Yeah, that's why we're here. We've got to awaken people to the need not only to overthrow or change the emperor and get a new emperor, a new name on the throne, but we have to look at the system that the emperor has to work in. And we have to understand it's not just these personalities. I mean, these guys can die of old age or they can kill each other, but that just leaves a vacancy for somebody waiting exactly like them to move into the void. So we have to think about the void, not so much who's at the top. We have to think about the system, the power that they have. And we have to work on that, because sure, there are a lot of people out there would love to be the emperor. And if you don't think about putting restraints on them, or as Jefferson would say, bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. If you don't think about that aspect of it, you can lose a lot of blood, and you can lose a lot of soldiers, and you can have a grim fight, but you'll never come out ahead because you'll just be replacing one despot with another.
Yeah, and they're getting worse over time, like here in Canada. Look at the clown that we have here called Justin Trudeau, what he's done. And I just had to share a picture here, if I can, Tim. I'm just going to share a picture because this is from when me and Josh, actually, and our friend John, we were protesting, against Bill C-51, which was our Patriot Act here in Canada, where they started to come after us as individuals because of our speech, and transgender, talking bad about them, that you need to address them by the 42 pronouns that they have. There was a whole bunch of anti-Muslim rhetoric that if you said anything that had to do with Muslims, you could end up, in prison as well. So that has happened here already, and it's coming. And as you can see here, I'm holding a little sign saying that I'm not a terrorist. Over here, and that's so important, because if we don't stand up and tell people, and give us our view that Ed has been doing for many decades, we will end up as those terrorists, if we can't tell people about our views and have a discussion with them and wake them up. Because if we don't, you're going to have the government running us into the ground, into concentration camps. That's what they would, if you really let them get what they want, so we always got to stand up and always be very loud, and always create new solutions for communicating with people around the world.
I agree with that totally, John, except I would be cautious about the word loud. Loud in terms of making sure we can be heard, yes. But if loud also means a little bit obnoxious and over,
that's not.
Then we pull that out of it. Yeah, we don't want to insult the people, even though they're on the other side. Most of those people are, they're brainwashed. They're convinced that what they're doing is the right thing, and we don't want to start poking them and say, "Hey, you're stupid. You don't got to listen to me now," because then that drives them into a
using the same
position.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, speaking of the emperor now, we've got
exactly.
Yeah, we've got the emperor now that's surrounded by the most popular president ever, surrounded by barbed wire fence and 30,000 troops to go. I mean, it's like a scene out of the Hunger Games. But did any of you see recently, it was like a few days ago, they were asking, I forgot the new press secretary's name, but they were asking her about liquidity problems in the system and, having all these different brokerage shutting down different accounts and GameStop and Wall Street Bets. And her response was something like, and John talking about transgenders reminded me of this. Her response was, well, did you just see that we just nominated the first ever woman Treasury Secretary? We've got plenty other women that are going to be joining her as, helping her out. And so we were talking about the liquidity crisis, and her response was, well, we just hired a woman. Like, so, I don't know. And it's nothing against women, but it's just like.
That's on the same scale, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're counting Janet Yellen as a woman, but no, I don't know.
Well, what's really funny though is that Janet Yellen was also the lady that said that we'll ever never see a recession in our lifetime. To her own thing though, it was reported that she had a urinary tract infection at that time, so she might have been a little bit delusional. But again, it comes back like she is probably even as corrupt as Ben Bernanke, probably the same, even worse. And like she's this cute little granny, running around and talking very, nicely.
You can speak for yourself when it
that's
comes to
what's really
cute,
funny
but
about
no.
her. No,
Yeah.
but she's this old little granny, like she reminds me almost of my mother-in-law, a very sweet old lady. But when you see it, like she's an evil person, and she knows it, but she portrays herself so wonderfully, and people like look at her and they see no threat, you know. And I think that's why they're putting in a lot of women right now, especially in the defense contractors. All of the CEOs are women right now, because it's so great, it's women, but they're still murdering people around the world. Like
Yeah, the policies
that's
don't
the thing.
change.
Yeah, exactly. So
Got
that has
nothing.
nothing to do. This whole women thing has nothing to do at all with the quality of person that's in that position. It has all to do with their intent, and what that organization does in the first place.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm delighted to see qualified women in positions of
Yeah.
authority and responsibility because, you know, let's face it, I admire women for the traits that they have that are different than the male traits. And most women, not all, but most women are more introspective, I think, than most men. I think they're more sensitive to human values. They have a built-in instinct. I'll be condemned for saying that, but I believe it's true. They have a built-in instinct to want to protect the helpless and the young. They raise children. They give birth to children. That's got instinct has to support that biological role. So they're more sensitive to human values than men, but men have other traits that are also perhaps that they have stronger values than the women in terms of being quick to act and I better not get into this because somebody's going to complain about my analysis. I'll just summarize by saying that I'll just summarize it by saying that thank God that men and women are different, and each gender has traits that are superior to the others, and so. But when it comes to being qualified to run for political office, I don't think it makes any difference at all.
You're not allowed to say that either. You're not allowed to say there's only two
yeah.
genders or differences. Now that might get us kicked off YouTube if you admit that there's differences between men and women. But it seems like all these positive traits for women, the women who get in power, and just anybody that gets in power, man or woman, it's always the evil people and the people that want power and dominate you. It's not. Kamala Harris is not the sensitive grandmother type. She's obviously somebody that would. It's like great that now we have the first brown vice president woman that's going to be dropping bombs on people all across the world. I'm sure so many people will be loving that.
Yeah, well, that's a sociological discussion, and we don't want to get into that because there'd be some professors that, well, it's because they live in a masculine world and they have to, survive and they've been conditioned by their culture and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So
that's
anyway.
a very long discussion. That would take hours. Let's not get into that today.
I just repeat, I'm so glad that women are different than men. I'd hate it if they were just like men. Be nothing more boring.
Well, that's what governments wants, though. It is, the whole collective thing is, everybody's got to be the same. That's what it
awful.
seems.
They all want. Thought. Yeah, it's a horrible thought. Oh my God.
I couldn't take it. It'd be like a horrible society to live in. And like how can you like live in a society where you can't use your thoughts to philosophize, to try to do things with your life. I couldn't be able to live in a life where I had to just be like equal to everybody else. I love to achieve things and do things with my life, and I don't want to be sitting on a couch somewhere and just watch TV or just go to one job and do one single thing every day. I couldn't stand it. So I'm gonna fight tooth and nail until I die.
Yeah, well, some people like that, John. Some people thrive on that.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that they wouldn't change a job for anything, no matter how much they disliked it, because I'd have to get used to a whole new routine. I'd have to work for somebody else I didn't like, or whatever their reasoning is.
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole crux that people would rather take, convenience rather than value their own privacy or value their own, I won't say safety, but it just seems like a lot of times we're seeing this erosion of rights because people would just rather be convenient. And I think in a previous answer to a question, you had talked about different, serfs and the one thing we have different. I mean, I almost strive to become a serf someday because a serf is only getting taxed, a very low percentage compared to today. So like right now we're getting, it's. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm sure it depended where you lived and what fiefdom you were living underneath, but most of those fiefdoms are probably taking 10, 15, 20% of your value that was created, and not 40, 50, depending on what state that you're in right now. So it's like someday, and I heard Peter Schiff mention this before, that he strives to become a serf someday because then he'll only had 10%, 15% extracted from him. So,
yeah.
Yep.
But that's like, even if you're a serf in Norway, even if you're a serf in Norway where I'm from, it's 36%. So there you go.
But I'm interested in what's the
so
next event you got coming. If you can let us know about the next event you've got coming up, or are there more red pills in the works? The last one, I just want to say the last one was probably put on about like a 2-month heads up. I think a lot of people were probably telling you shouldn't do it, or not sure if anyone's going to show up to it. And I went to it, and it was packed, auditorium, conference room. The speakers, a lot of times I don't even listen to speakers because I feel like I know a lot of the different subjects depending on what conference I'm going to. But this one, I sat through almost every single speaker, learned stuff. I mean, we had guys like Dr. Andrew Kaufman there, was breaking down the PCR test and how much of a scam that was, and Koch's postulate, and I learned a lot there. And then, Del Bigtree rocked the house, Robert Kiyosaki. It was just, a who's who there, and a lot of it was dedicated to exposing the coronavirus. But, can you let us know what you might have planned for a future Red Pill and how you want to help awaken humanity with future events that you're going to be putting on, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Timmy. We have a lot of plans for the future of Red Pill because that's part of our Operation Outreach, where we reach out to people who haven't really maybe they haven't been awakened to the problem very long, and they haven't had a lifetime like I have and some of the old timers to study this thing, and everything is new to them, and they're truth seekers in that honest sense of the word, and they sense that there might be something that we have that is something they need to know. Most of them come with an open mind. We have very few people that come because they necessarily sign up with everything that we have in our program. A lot of them are saying, gee, I wonder if that's true. That sounds a little crazy. But they come because they're curious and they come and check us out. Those are the people we want to talk to, the ones with open minds. And so it's Operation Outreach, and I would rather talk to people who come with questions and who are a little skeptical than talk to the choir, So that's what Red Pill is all about. And yes, it's a way of getting our message out to large numbers of people because this ripples on and on and on. It's not just the people who come, but we live stream it. We had the largest live stream audience that we've ever had this time, and next time it'll be, I'm sure, much, much bigger than that. Yes, it was on Jekyll Island back in October for the last one. And actually, we had, when you count everybody, the exhibitors and all the speakers and their families and everybody that came, it was about 750 people that were there. It was an amazing crowd, considering we were all supposed to be on lockdown and afraid to go out of our houses. So I set out the message, look, stop being afraid, get out, meet people, press the flesh, form coalitions, learn. You can't do all that hiding inside your house. That's why they want to keep you in your house. So the only view of reality you have is through your television or what shows up on your video screen on your computer. That's not reality. That's somebody has funneled things out, and you just see what you're supposed to see. So if you want to see the real world, get out of your house, get on a train or a plane, or get in your car or something, and move around and meet people. So that was kind of the message. And so it was very successful. I was relieved and gratified to see how really successful it was. And the next one is already planned. It's scheduled for June 4th, 5th, and 6th. And it'll be in Rapid City, South Dakota. Well, what's that all about? What's in Rapid City, South Dakota? Well, first of all, South Dakota is one of the few remaining sane states in the Union where they don't have this universal lockdown going on all over the place. And we're assured that, there are certain rules and regulations that they have to post on the wall, but nobody pays any attention to them. You don't have to. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't wear a mask. If you want to hold hands with your sweetheart, you can hold hands with your sweetheart. You don't have to be 6 feet away, and so forth. And so we thought, well, that's pretty good. So we're going to go there, and it's only about 30-minute drive from Mount Rushmore. So it's kind of scenic and historic. Many people have never seen Mount Rushmore and would like to see it. It's a beautiful piece of the world, especially in June. It'll be beautiful weather.
Yeah,
So,
the Black Hills are gorgeous down there. It's a
they
very
are,
good
yeah.
place to camp. You really enjoy it if you go
Yeah.
down there. I've been there myself, so it's a beautiful place.
It is, yes. So anyway, that's why we decided to do it. They have a magnificent conference center there, one of the best I've ever seen, and so it's scheduled. And we haven't promoted it yet because we haven't seen the contract. We've come to an agreement, but nothing has been signed, and it's just a matter of a couple of days now when that'll be done. So we're not really promoting it on the internet, although some people have banged down the doors, so to speak. And I looked at my screen the other day, and we had 3 sales already to tickets. How did they even know about it? But anyway, they found out, and they're signing up for it already. So I can tell you that we'll have absolutely stellar presenters again, and I'm collecting these names every time I hear about somebody doing something outstanding. I put it in my file. We have a lot of people to invite that most people have never heard about, but they're at the forefront of not only the Corona Theater, but all the monetary theater too, and the terrorism theater, and the
They're all kind of blending now into the same theater as everything starts to.
the Great Reset Theater, all these things. So we're going to have a great lineup, and of course, to me, the most important thing is not the speakers. And I would walk a million miles to hear some of these guys. But that's not really it. It's the fact that we bring people together from not only all over the continent, but all over the world. Now, that's pretty hard to do increasingly, but they come anyway. They find a way. Wasn't it you, John, that told me the other day that there's nothing going to stop you from coming to this one, even if you had to quarantine for 2 weeks to get back? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll quarantine on a camping spot there if I had to. Yeah.
Yeah, I drove 5,200 miles round trip to go to the other Red Pill, and that's probably the first time in 8 or 9 years that I've driven that much. And Josh and I are looking to potentially drive to the next week or so because we've got some people to interview up in California. But yeah, I was shortchanging you guys. I was telling everybody it was 600 people, and so it was 750. But did a lot of them die off because nobody was wearing masks? And so I think I saw 2 people wearing masks. So unfortunately, it was a super spreader event, and now all of them aren't here anymore. But I didn't hear any reports of anyone getting sick. Anything.
Nobody got sick, and the 2 masks that you saw were worn by employees of the conference center, and not by the attendees. I didn't see anybody with a mask.
Well, I have a theory why I don't know anybody in the freedom movement that have been sick yet from this COVID thing. And you know what's funny? My theory is that I think we pay attention to our health. We looked at the healthcare system and looked at what's available for us, and especially you, Ed. You're doing extremely well. Like you're turning 90 soon, and you're running around like a guy in your 40s, and so it's very important to I think a lot of us actually, because we take self-care and we are independent individuals and we treat ourselves that way, we try to find solutions to give ourselves the best possible health care so we're not a burden on society. And I think that would be very important, and I think that's probably one of the number one reasons why we're not seeing sick people among us. it's because we're really healthy.
There's no question about that, John. Most of our people are interested in health as much as they're interested in freedom, and they know that what good is it to be free if you're sick in bed or have to walk around with a tube up your nose or something? What's good is freedom, and on the other hand, what good is health if you're a slave in a slave labor camp? So you've got to have both of those elements in your life to enjoy the fulfillment of being a human being. So our people understand that, another factor is that most of our people have learned the hard way, as I have done, to learn to question authority, because we found out that authorities, especially if they're an authority affiliated with some institution that has a lot of money and a lot of power, and by that I'm talking about governments and large corporations. The authorities in those kinds of institutions tend to be corrupted by that money, treasure trove, and the power it gives them, and they become corrupted, and they're the authorities. And so I've never seen a study on it. I'd love to see it, but I'll bet if an honest, objective study were to be made, the heads and the executives of these institutions, big governments and big corporations, you're going to probably find about an 85% corruption level there. Whereas out in the general public, it's probably maybe a 5 or 12% corruption level. But corruption seeks money and power, and money and power creates corruption. So there you have it. And so our people are outside of that vicious cycle. I don't know of anybody that's the head of a big corporation or high-ranking official in the government. They're all just regular people trying to conduct their lives and earn a living for their families. And that's about it, and they want to do what is right for themselves and the rest of their fellow passengers on this planet called Earth, this spaceship. And so anyway, yeah, I agree with you, and I think all those things together are why the people I see at our conferences are the healthiest group of people I have ever seen in my life. And you're right, I'm 89 right now, and I don't feel like I'm over 88.
Well, if it wasn't for the missus dragging you away, I think at one time you were out at 2:30 in the morning, and we were at the Jekyll Island. But it was a very awesome experience to be at the actual
that's where all you
clubhouse.
guys were. All the young guys were out there talking and having a good time, and I'm not going to miss that. Are you kidding?
No, I don't know how many times we hung out after like 2-3 a.m. Sometimes I remember me and Ed being in Las Vegas. We were up until I think it was 4 or 5 a.m. almost, and one of the ladies had to take the airplane and leave because we were just hanging out there talking. And that was actually when we planned the Red Pill Expos, the first one.
Yeah, that lady actually had a room in the hotel, and she never got into it. She never used it.
Yeah, exactly.
Ezra, do you have a theme for this upcoming Red Pill? Is it just kind of in the greater reset, or
Tim? The theme is Red Pill.
Okay,
that's the theme, and within that category, there are all kinds, and it could be, yeah. Now we have done a couple of single theme meetings, but they're not the Red Pill Expos. Yeah, the best one of those was an inconvenient lie.
Here, right behind me. Yeah, in Phoenix.
Right there in Phoenix. About the hoax of global warming. That was a single theme conference, but the Red Pill really is our theme. And under that umbrella, there's so many things that can be brought and discussed. And I think it's part of the value of that program is that people don't get just one topic. I mean, a lot 100%. Of times, even myself, when I spend my life pursuing this thing, I'll come across something, I say, gee, I didn't know anything about this, Yep. And so many of our people are coming to the expos because probably a third or more of the topics on a stage are about things they've never heard about before. So if we did just single theme, like global warming or the Great Reset or COVID or whatever it is, it would be, more and more and more the same thing. But this way we've got probably on an average of 15 or 20 different topics, all of which are equally fascinating.
Yeah, one of the speakers you had that was more of a different topic, but I thought it was a fascinating subject. I'm blanking on her name right now, but she was talking about how to grow basically sustainable food on a small plot of land, and how you could have rabbits versus chickens versus doing this thing versus doing that thing, and it was really how you could create enough calories to be able to sustain yourself on a very small plot of land. And I thought that was one of the more valuable things, because it's not the all the financial stuff that we're always talking about all day. It's not all the other red pill stuff. It's a solution. Hey, the real anarchy, really beating the system, is becoming self-reliant. So I really, thank you for having her on the stage to help wake people up. And I was like, I maybe need to try some rabbit now. I don't know. I've never had rabbit before, but
things that you can raise in your own backyard if you have a backyard. And she even went further. So if you don't have a backyard, there's certain things you can raise on your windowsill or out on your if you have a little ledge or something, you can grow quite a bit of food. At least maybe not enough
Yeah.
to completely sustain yourself, but enough to make a difference between being really hungry and and
Yeah.
and therefore not be able
But
to
think
do
about the
anything. Go ahead.
yeah, but think about the power. Huh? I'm an avid gardener. I love gardening. I have a massive plot, and think about if everybody did a little bit. It would be like night and day. There would be no need for a central government telling us that we're gonna fix poverty, but we never fix it.
Never fix it.
People would be
Well,
able to
no.
give. To
Well, of
the
course.
yeah.
Yeah. Look, let's be honest. If they ever found if the if the American Cancer Society, let's say, ever took some of that billions of dollars that they collect and actually used it to find a cure for cancer, they'd all be out of a job.
Oh, 100% they would.
All
And
those
yeah,
people,
that's why they don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would be suicide to find a cure for cancer if you're employed by the American Cancer Society and any other, any other charity that's going to solve some problem. If they ever solve it, they put themselves out of a job. So you can be sure they're not going to do it. It's like we got a homeless problem in Los Angeles, and so we form an agency for the homeless people, and the agency's got 3 people in it, and their budget is $80,000, and they put up some shelters and they provide some food, and it's great. These people are getting served, but they send the word out to their cousins back in Missouri, and by the end of the year, the homeless population has now doubled. Well, now the agency has to get more funding. So they double their budget, and now they have 6 people or 9 people on the committee and on the agency, and the number of homeless has tripled. And by the next year, it's tripled again, and they have to have a bigger budget and more bureaucrats to service this, and it just grows and feeds upon itself. And they wouldn't, if these agencies were to solve the homeless problem, well, they'd all have to go find another job. And they're not going to do that. They're just going to create the problem and look like they're solving it, and so they can justify more budget and more people and staff, and then more homeless are coming in, and more people are becoming homeless because it's easier to be homeless and get taken care of than to work. So that's how it works.
Yeah, and then they don't. I mean, I often wonder, like, how come in Phoenix we don't just have orange trees, everywhere, and that the homeless could go eat oranges or grapefruits or other, citrus trees that grow here. I mean, they've made things illegal because of HOAs and different ordinances. You can't have orange trees, because then they could get on the ground and it could look bad. Or I mean, it's just, and then you can't collect rainwater because that's illegal, and you can't. And it's just everything is to then get people to suck off the government teat more, and like, oh, I've got a hydroponic tower garden that I got growing in my house, but because right now I'm in between places and don't have a plot of land right now. But there's things that you could do, like, instead of giving everybody welfare checks or food stamps, you could encourage people to go have community gardens. But it's all about getting people just dependent on the system instead of taking back that sovereignty from yourself. But it's just maddening that in 2021 that we're in a situation where there isn't those things that are already out there for the communities. There aren't orange trees that I could just go off and pick some fruit from in Phoenix because they've made it illegal and it's ordinances and things like that. And it's just maddening that you have all these liberals that want to help people, but it's always helping people from some bureaucratic think tank round table ribbon cutting thing to look at how virtuous we are, stealing your money and giving money over there to then have them go to the grocery store to buy a GMO crap. And it's just, I'm rambling now because we already know the answer is, just taking your own self-reliance on everything. And is there anything else that's, front and center for you that, you want to, leave with the people to, help get some optimism about what's going on? And because especially for us, in our 30s, or we might even have some people that might even be 25, or younger, who are listening to this, what type of optimism do you see for, the younger generation, the millennials who are out there to, be able to get a better world for our kids and grandkids someday?
Well, I think you've already created the introduction to my remarks by what you said a moment ago.
You're welcome.
And that is that the trend has been to discourage people from discovering the value of being self-reliant. The trend has been to get people to think it's the natural and proper thing to depend on the state for everything. And that's why it's so annoying to hear, John, you say that all of your your friends and your family, or not all of them, but many of them are getting these checks now, and they don't have to go to work, and so they're sitting around all day long communicating, and that communicating is good. But now they're dependent on the state for those checks. So if they start saying things in their communications that the state doesn't like, they'll get a notice that if you keep this up, you're not going to get your check anymore. And so all of a sudden, even good people who know better, if they're dependent on the state, become neutralized. They can't do anything about it, or they'll starve. It's not anymore the bayonet. It's not that they're necessarily going to put you in a camp and work you to death. They're just going to make sure you can't buy food or shelter, or you can't go anywhere. You don't have any means of transportation. You can't buy clothes. You can't do anything. So that's what we're coming up against. So the self-reliant thing is more important than most people think. And so with that in mind, that's the introduction, because what we're doing over on the red pill side is to set in motion a mechanism whereby we can communicate this importance of self-reliance. Another way of saying that is individualism. That's part of that package to the world. And the Red Pill Expo, as important as it is only one part of that. It's very important because it's the outreach. It's how we find new people, and we break past the choir, and we go even past the people in the pews. We go out the door to the people on the street, and we're out of our own little sphere of influence, and we go out and meet people we've never met before. That's a very important part of the Red Pill Expo. But now after that, there's something we call Red Pill University. And that's, now you asked me what advice I would give. I would urge anybody who's interested in following up on this kind of an idea of what do you do to create a better world. I would urge them to spend some time, budget maybe an hour, and come to redpilluniversity.org and splash around on that website, because what you'll find there is not only a lot of great information that you're not going to find anywhere else, but you'll find the machinery, the mechanism is in place to create what we call campuses, which are little groups of people. We hope to have one in every county in the United States, and outside of the United States in every province, or whatever the geographical counterpoint would be, is groups of people who can become active. We call them boots on the ground, can become active in their community and begin to actually influence local politics. If we don't convert our knowledge and our resolve and our dedication and all of our efforts, if we don't convert that into political action, then we'll never get influence or control of those levers of power, the police power, the military, the coercion elements of society. That's, if we can't influence those things through constitutional, legal, and ethical means, which is the legislative process, then we're just wasting our time, because we'll never have power to bring any of this about. So where do you start with that? Most people say, well, gee, we got to find out who we got to vote for. Like, who are you going to vote for president here in the United States? But you're starting at the wrong side. If you see, well, what candidates have been chosen for me to select between, which is how it works. I have no idea who chose those candidates, how they got to be a candidate. And they never think that maybe both candidates have the same manager, like two wrestlers both owned by the same manager. Sometimes they have to go into the ring and fight each other, but they both are being paid by the same manager. It's the same thing in politics. If you wait to see who's going to be running for president, and then you have to choose between them, or choose between two political parties that both are owned by the same manager, and if you wait for that, you lose, because it's all over by that time. When you build a movement, it has to start from the bottom up, not from the top down. And that means you have to be influential in who your sheriff is, who's on your board of education, city council, the county board of supervisors. You got to select your own candidates. Don't wait to see who's offering themselves to you. You go out and find candidates that you know they have principles. And they're not just saying things to get your vote. You know, because you know them and their life, what they do and what they believe. And you convince them to run for local office. And you organize teams of people to help them be elected. and you influence all aspects of community life at the local level. This is where you have to build a movement. So this is my message, that if we're really interested in changing the world, we have to start reconstructing the society from the bottom up, not from the top down. And you do that with campuses or some other kind of structure. There are other organizations that do this sort of thing, and they call them chapters or units or something. But ours are called campuses. So I'm urging you, if this interests you, come to Red Pill University, spend a little time splashing around, and get a feel for what we're trying to do. And then if you like it, sign on, become a patron, and then there's another step that goes to Freedom Force International. It gets to be kind of complicated, but it's not so complicated. It just means that there are different levels for different types of activity. Pick your spot, take a deep breath, and say, here we go. And then jump in and start spending some of your time in helping to bring this about.
And a deep breath without a mask on. So that would be the
deep breath without a mask.
Well, they still let us breathe without masks. But we would definitely, thank you for all of your wisdom throughout the years and through all of your activism and putting yourself out there when it wasn't a very easy time to put yourself out there. Whereas now it's exponentially easier to put yourself out there than it was, certainly 50 years ago when you started doing that. So thank you so much for spending, a little bit of time on our little show over here. Definitely appreciate that. And thank you for all the wisdom, and for anyone out there who did not see the last interview where J. Griffin was talking about the white dove and QAnon and Nasara, highly recommend that. We'll have that link down below. And John, anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, all I want to say is I really appreciate, the fantastic work Ed has done, through the years. He's been a great mentor for me since 2013 when I started working with him at Freedom Force International. He taught me a lot about, perseverance and not, giving up on your dreams, not just, personal dreams, but actually putting out yourself and finding what you're really passionate about and getting into action and doing that, because that's what Ed is doing. He's doing what he's passionate about, and that's why he's so full of life and very excited about where we're going, and he's never going to stop until his last breath. So I really want to thank you, Ed, because of your great mentorship and everything that you've done, and where we're going to go over the next couple of years here, because we need you more than ever, Ed, and we need to step up and get all the messages out as much as we can, because they're trying more and more to shut us up. So we just got to keep on going and never give up.
Thank you for that, John. It's good to know that you're on the team. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. Make sure to head to timandjohnshow.com to get on our email list, all the other ways you can find us, because you can't rely on us and bank on us being on YouTube forever. But anyways, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Mr. J. Griffin. Thank you to John. And until next time, I'll talk with everyone later. Thank you.
All right.